speaking of movies named after animals, would you like to introduce our BFI movie of the week?
I would. Our BFI Sight Sound movie of the week is the 1963 movie Italian film The Leopard. This is a film that was directed by director Count Luchino Visconti.
Count. I wasn't aware.
He is a count. Yes. So,
wow.
There's an interesting conversation to be had with Visconti as a director, as this is his only film on the list. But before we get into that, I will just briefly summarize the film. It is a historical epic that takes place during the there's a term for it, but starts off with famous Italian historical figure Garibaldi, who is invading Sicily, sort of. And there's a lot of different like political things going on in Italy that most people, and even I think at this point Italians, probably are not aware of at this point. But this is essentially the story of the formation of a single entity known as Italy, which before was, controlled by various European powers, and for the longest time wasn't a singular nation. And so in the background of this film is that shifting political landscape from the old kings of Spain and Italy and the Papal States. It's shifting from them to the new order, away from the aristocracy to the more democracy of sorts.
Eccellenza, questo è un grande onore per me, perché
and that's all in the background, and it's a lot, but the story is about a Sicilian noble who is coming to terms with all that stuff, all that's changing around him, the violence, the political upheaval, the introduction of democracy, and his subsequent relationship with his nephew, and marrying him off to the nouveau riche, a new businessman. It's hard, really. It's
loaded. It's quite a bit.
It's not like one of those historical epics like Lawrence of Arabia, where it's about, okay, well, Lawrence is advising in the Arab Rebellion. Great, that's the story. This is just like a man is coming to terms with him getting older and the way the world is shifting out from underneath him. And it's an interesting film because there is so much historical, political context behind the scenes that in order to fully appreciate what the film is doing, you probably should know a little bit about. But yeah, I think the emotional journey that happens of him dealing with the changing times is at the very least clear. And so,
especially towards the end, last half.
So I'm curious to hear what Chandler thinks, as I have seen this before. I have the Criterion Blu-ray. I'll discuss that. But
see, yes. Not only have I not seen this before, but this is one of those few movies that I hadn't even heard of until you brought it up.
Wow. You have you heard of Luchino Visconti before?
Nope.
The director? Interesting.
I knew the only movies of his that I knew was Rocco and His Brothers. And I think it's because you watched that semi-recently. Yeah. And yeah.
Which I think you would like, because it prominently features boxing. And people learn how to box.
I like boxing.
Which I've recently learned you like.
I do. Yeah, I don't know what it is with these Italian directors, but it's a big blind spot. Lots of Italian directors. I don't know. Just pass me by. Yeah, so this is a movie, to me, I like these kinds of movies. These movies about transitions. It reminded me a lot of like Colonel Blimp, Inherent Vice, those kinds of movies. I'll admit, I watched this over the course of 2 days, hour and a half, split it into two. I was just not feeling it to sit it all down for a 3-hour movie. The first day, the first hour and a half, I was bored. I was very bored.
Hmm.
To the point where I thought I just wasn't gonna like this movie. Maybe because I got through the first hour and a half and I had like a day to sit. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what the story was. I didn't know what the themes were. I didn't know. I definitely should have looked up some of this historical context because I feel like that definitely helps.
Ma quale re? L'hai detto tante volte pure tu. Se fosse ancora vivo il re Ferdinando. Ma Franceschiello, Dio guardi. No, zio, no.
But after like sort of, watching the first half, letting it sit, kind of getting an idea, the second day when I watched the second half, I was a lot more engaged. So I'm hesitant to say that to what I fully think about this movie. I think overall it is a good movie. It's obviously a gorgeous movie. And it's one of those movies that, again, like I was saying with To Sleep with Anger, when I was reading it or watching it, I thought, this feels like a book. And it wasn't until I started listening to the commentary that I realized it was a book. So I thought that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the surface level observations, my biggest flaw with the movie, you don't dub Burt Lancaster.
A 45 anni un uomo può credersi ancora giovane. Fino al momento in cui si accorge di avere dei figli grandi, in età da mare. Allora la vecchiaia gli piomba addosso di colpo.
I understand why. You want to keep the language consistent, but Burt Lancaster just has this presence about him, and it was very jarring watching him, one of the most beloved American macho actors, be dubbed by some Italian guy.
It's so interesting you say that, because I'm sure you heard in the commentary that the person who did that said that dubbing him was actually better.
Really? Did he speak Italian?
What?
Did Burt Lancaster record his lines in Italian? Did he perform it?
The person who dubbed the person on the commentary, David Cowie.
Yeah,
anyway,
I listened to the first half.
Thought it was even better, like not just in terms of like a utilitarian thing. You just need to dub it because it's an Italian language film.
Yeah,
he thought it was just a good thing to dub Burt Lancaster, taking the opposite opinion of you. I take a much different opinion. It's just it's an Italian film. You need to have it in Italian.
No,
that's just what they did.
It. I get it. I know why they did it. I don't disagree with their decision. I just love Burt Lancaster, and I wanted to see Burt Lancaster. I didn't even watch the American version. I didn't bother.
Oh, I was gonna say there is an American version which is in English.
Yeah,
which is interesting. I always find it interesting when they felt the need to release a foreign language film in English. I'm not sure I'm ever gonna watch it, but I suppose
I guess there's no real reason to. It's 20 minutes shorter, I guess. But that doesn't really matter to me because, again, I love Burt Lancaster, whatever. But he does have the physicality, the appearance, the performance for this role. I bought him as the patriarch. I bought him as the middle-aged man learning to cope with the new set of circumstances. Fine.
It's interesting that I think when the film was released, Burt Lancaster's performance wasn't exactly appreciated. I'll put it that way. And I ironically think this is one of the best performances I've seen from Burt Lancaster. And Lancaster actually, they had a rough start, him and Visconti. I'm sure you heard in the commentary, but the role of so people who don't know, Italian films quite often cast people from who didn't know any Italian, French actors, English actors, whatever, and dubbed them. That was just common practice. It was assumed you would dub.
That was practice in a lot of European movies at the time. Was just don't even record on-set sound. I know French people did it a lot. French looped everything.
Yes, but even in France, like a lot of times they see there's a difference between dubbing and ADR. Like Italian films would just get different actors for Italian actors to dub their lines. No reason they recorded the lines in Italian.
Yeah,
it just was something
weird.
That like you would cast for the voice and you would cast for the physical appearance. But I think this is one of Burt Lancaster's best performances, and it's interesting that like the moment you see him on screen, he's often like Sometimes he's small in the frame. Sometimes he's surrounded by a bunch of other people. But there's always this real sense of authority that is just kind of inherent to people with power and people, good actors. And Burt Lancaster is, I don't know. I feel like I'm aware of the dubbing, but I got used to it pretty quickly, especially 8.5. I picked up on the fact that Italians did that with that film, and then I was just like, all right, fine. But there is a something interesting about the differences between the book, which is apparently it's a very famous book.
One of the Italian great literary works.
Yeah, some magazine called it one of the best historical epics ever written. Obviously, I've never read it, and in the book the titular leopard, Prince Don Fabrizio, of Salina, is older. He's an older man. Burt Lancaster was only like 49. He's in early 50s when he played this role. And at certain points in the film, he does look quite young. But other times he looks old, and it's not exactly consistent. But I think there's an interesting development here that let me get his name. I'm just going to get his name right. Peter Cowie. It is Peter Cowie. Peter Cowie doesn't pick up on this in the commentary, and I'm going to not disagree with him, but I think his performance adds something that the book could never have, in that the fact is the age of the prince doesn't matter at all. And I think it adds something that he does look young at certain points, in that it's not a physical death that he goes through. He's not physically getting closer to death. It's his way of life. It's his spiritually and how he feels. The world around him is coming to an end. And having him be a little younger kind of emphasizes that over the physicality of death, which doesn't matter. Who cares if you die? It's the point of the film is the passing of an age and him finding things changing about him. And, he could be younger, he could be older, but the fact is like he's so set in his ways, he's so ingrained in his social strata that
that's all he knows.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how old or how young it is. Doesn't matter if he's going to die tomorrow or in 30 years. His way of life is coming to an end, and you feel that. And I think Burt Lancaster sells that in his performance and just his physicality.
Bisogna fare delle riparazioni alla nostra tomba ai Cappuccini.
There's a sort of there's another element to it where Burt Lancaster, again, you don't need this guy like 60 or whatever. He looks very middle-aged, which is fine. But you look at Burt Lancaster, and Burt Lancaster just has that actor quality, that leading man quality. And you see that in him, but it's aged, it's older, it's middle-aged, whatever. But you can see that he's sort of like an echo of his nephew, Alan
Tancredi.
Tancredi.
Ma zio, che cosa dici? A che cosa pensi? Io penso spesso alla morte. Vedi, l'idea non mi spaventa certo.
Yeah. So you can see that both these men have that leading man type thing. You can see that Prince, the Prince was very likely similar to Tancredi when he was younger, but he's not that guy anymore. And you can sort of see the way that they share the scenes together, where Burt Lancaster, there's like a flicker of that young fire that the nephew has, Tancredi has, but it's gone. And you can slowly get that sense that Tancredi's sort of like taking over his position, his like role as the new young attractive guy or whatever. And there's a bit of a meta thing there, but also you have to understand that it's French star different than an American star. I'm sure, whatever. But no, I think he's great.
So to go back to the very beginning, a little bit about my history with the film, and then what I thought of the movie, which I've kind of hinted at. But I blind bought the Criterion. Actually, no, that's not strictly true. It was on the Criterion channel a while ago, and I watched the first 10 minutes, and I said, "This is boring. Fuck this," and I turned it off. Didn't like it. And so didn't watch it. And then it came around to I think it was about 2019 when I blind bought this essentially. I was like, all right, time to give it another watch. As we know, I have a thing for long movies and historical epics. So I was like, well, might as well buy it. Take a chance. And I watched it and I was like, this is good. It wasn't, I was unfair the first time I watched it. Much the same reaction you have. But this most recent time watching it, I don't know what it was, but something about it clicked that I was like, this is just really great movie. And it's special. Like there's something about it that feels unique in the way that only like a unique director can. Like it's a unique voice that I don't think we've had on the BFI list yet. And it's the only film, it's only Visconti film on the BFI list. And so I'm happy that voice is on here. And as I said, he is a count. He came from aristocracy of that old era. And I think there's a whole interesting thing that you should look into who Visconti was and why this film is such an interesting expression of who he is, in addition to who the author of the book was, because the author of the book was also a member of the aristocracy, looking back nostalgically on these years. And Visconti has a very different reaction. And interesting connections here is that a film we talked about earlier in the podcast, A Day in the Country, the unfinished Jean Renoir short film. Visconti knew Coco Chanel, the famous fashion designer, and through Coco Chanel, met a bunch of people, including Jean Renoir. And that's how he got into film. He was an assistant on A Day in the Country. And apparently didn't do much, but that's how he got his start in film. So it's interesting that a connection with another film on the list.
Steven Spielberg on Shadows.
Yeah. And then, so he comes from this position of great wealth and aristocracy, and he falls into the crowd of Jean Renoir, who was a Marxist. And essentially, Visconti became, after that, a lifelong Marxist. Fairly, not very vocal about it. He was also bisexual, leaning heavily towards being gay, but did have both relationships. Also important to know, makes it an interesting viewing. So a very interesting man for his time and place. Like that's not the kind of person you'd expect to Italy, of all places, the home of the Vatican City, to produce, but they did. Mm-hmm. And he got his start in his career started very much as one of the founding fathers of the Italian neorealist movement. Which, watching The Leopard, if this is your first Visconti film, you'd say this man made neorealist films, because he kind of has a similar career path to Fellini, where they both started very grounded neorealist. But the echoes of what they would do later on in their career were there. And then really, I think with Senso and finally with like The Leopard, he fully made the transition into his directorial style as it is primarily known as, this kind of rich, luxurious, grand epic, romantic, historical epics that he did. Interesting guy. I've had various luck and not luck with Visconti. I really love his neorealist work. I highly recommend La Terra Trema and Rocco and His Five Brothers, which isn't strictly neorealist, but it's adjacent. But everything else I've seen of his, I hate. Absolutely hate. Don't like it. Senso and Death in Venice, find absolutely intolerable. And I'll have to give him a rewatch because obviously The Leopard grew on me. But there's something about, to cap this all off, that I think this viewing in particular was successful for me because I had the knowledge of him as a director, both his neorealist beginnings and his extravagant final years. And I think The Leopard for me, that highlighted the fact that there is, despite the fact that the film follows the aristocrats, and it is very much seeped in world of luxury and all that. There are moments of his neorealist past in there, in that what makes the film interesting for me is not necessarily because not much happens, but I think it does a great job of providing counterexamples of like contrasting things together. The old grandeur of Don Fabrizio versus Tancredi, who is an opportunist. The old world versus the new world. There's a great scene where the priest, they're stopping overnight as they're traveling to their other home, and the priest talks with some of the local peasants.
È tutt'altro. Sono differenti. Loro non badano a certe cose che per noi altri sono molto importanti. E magari hanno dei timori che noi ignoriamo.
You get to connect with something outside of that world, and there's a great juxtaposition of that. And then of course you see some of the servants, and one of my favorite cuts of the film, and maybe of all time. It seems like a very Eisenstein-y montage edits. It's very much an edit that a Marxist, a self-proclaimed Marxist, would make. It's near the end of the film, and it's right after Don Fabrizio has a discussion with a government bureaucrat. He essentially says, "Look, I'm a dying breed of a man. You don't want me in government." And then it cuts to a beautiful landscape shot of the Sicilian countryside and the peasants farming. And you stick on that for a few moments, and then it fades immediately towards the grand 45-minute ballroom sequence that finishes off the film. So you go immediately from like poor Sicilian countryside to the most grand opulence that the film has to offer, and it's there's stuff like that throughout the film that makes it interesting and makes it like it has something very interesting to say, and that's I'll let you talk.
There's a lot of really interesting cuts too, where I feel like they cut mid-note in a song. Like the scenes, they have this big sweeping orchestral scores, and then just go boop immediately to the next scene, which I thought was funny. But no, that scene you're talking about where the prince rejects the offer to be in the government, I think that's where everything started to click for me, because this whole time I was just thinking, okay, is this going to be a revolutionary drama? Is this going to be like a sort of conflicting marital drama or whatever? And it's at that moment where I realized, oh, okay, this is about the fact that he doesn't know what to do with his life. Change is coming. He can't stop it. He's too old to learn anything new. He's just going to enjoy the last days of this era, this lifestyle.
Sono un esponente della vecchia classe, fatalmente compromesso con il passato regime, e a questo legato da vincoli di decenza, se non di affetto.
And I think that's what made the last scene so great to me, because it's literally like a whole hour is this ballroom scene.
Yeah.
And it's great. I mean, they had great, obviously, the battle sequences I thought really good. It's just, it's all scale, no like micro filmmaking, just here's a camera, fucking war. Do war, and I'm going to capture it all. And those are fun too. But like this, I really got the feel of the epic in this last like hour, where as I get older, I'm starting to appreciate period movies more, and I just thought that ball looks like fun. Everybody's dancing, and you can feel just how long this ball is going on. And it's sort of like, this is, to me, that final ball is like, the prince has fully come to terms with the fact that there's no stopping what's coming. The world's going to change almost overnight. He's going to be left behind. To me, it feels like this is his last hurrah. And I think that's what makes the ball so special. He gets to dance a little bit. He does the waltz. The fucking Angelica says, do this dance with me, this risque new dance. And Burt Lancaster says, no, but I will do the waltz. Because that's what's going on. The waltz, the old stuff, this is what he knows, this is what he's going to do while he can still do it. And it goes on and it goes on, you can see people are leaving. There's those people who are dancing at like 4 a.m. by themselves, and I liked this movie. I thought it was good. It wasn't until literally that last scene where Burt Lancaster says, "I think I'm gonna walk."
Ho già salutato tutti quanti. Pensaci tu a fare chiamare la carrozza per la zia. Io torno a piedi. A piedi a quest'ora? Ho bisogno d'aria.
Where I kind of understood exactly what everything was going on. And it's such a melancholy ending. He's just walking and it's like one last look at this world that will be gone tomorrow. Not tomorrow, but essentially tomorrow. Right. He's taking one last moonlit stroll through his life before it ends. And I thought, damn, this is pretty great. This is pretty great.
It is. It's telling such a subtle story, and it's a story. It's like a thematic story. Like what's actually the actual narrative details, what we would call the plot, isn't really what is being told. And rather, it's there is a lot kind of under the surface. Yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach this film. Obviously, there's an interesting, maybe not interesting, but there's a love story kind of going on with Tancredi and whatever her name is, played by Claudia Cardinelli and Alain Delon, two of the most attractive European actors of the day. And they're together, and it's like, how can you not be at the very least interested in watching?
This is what Paul Schrader would argue cinema is: seeing two non-ugly people.
Was it Paul Schrader? I feel like
one of his Facebook posts talked about, like, you go to what? You're telling me you go to movies to see ugly people? You don't. You go to movies to see people much more attractive than we are. And he would know because the man's a fucking goblin.
It was Martin Scorsese. I'll send you this video. He was doing an interview about some of his favorite films, and The Leopard is one of them, obviously. We agree. I feel like Paul Schrader and I are two people who disagree entirely on film, and then Martin Scorsese is different in that I don't always like his movies, but I feel like we have the exact same, like, we love the same kind of movies, have a similar kind of approach to cinema, at least on a theoretical level. Yeah, and so with the Don Fabrizio and it's his film, really. And this time around, what it also hit home to me that I was really the film was really clicking with me this time was that before he has the dance with Angelica, or maybe it's afterwards. It's afterwards. He's in the bathroom, which I don't know if you noticed, but there's a bunch of pots in a different room right by the bathroom. Those are all filled with shit because they don't have plumbing. They're chamber pots.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
Fun little historical detail for you there.
Nice.
Please notice. And then, but he looks in the mirror and he has like a little tear, and I'm like, why am I feeling emotionally connected for this wealthy aristocrat who the film makes very clear is disconnected with the time, but also with the struggles of the regular Sicilian people around him. But I felt myself like genuinely engaged with and sad for him and what he was going through. And it clicked with me emotionally. Like, before my first full viewing, I was like, this is a really interesting film. It's filmed wonderfully, beautifully shot, edited, all that. But this time it really struck me as a well-made movie on a narrative and emotional level.
Sono certo che I siciliani vorranno migliorare. Non nego che alcuni siciliani trasportati fuori dell'isola possano riuscire a svegliarsi, ma devono partire molto giovani. A 20 anni è già tardi. La crosta si è formata.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a very literary movie where things just sort of come and go, conflicts, characters introduced and they're gone. But the underlying theme of this transition, of this age that is ending, you can look at every character and you can see how that character factors into it. Like, I'm just now realizing that Tancredi is not his son, he's his nephew. and you see the prince's son. But the prince's son, when you look at him, the more and more I think about it, the more tragic it is, because that son, he is equipped and raised to dominate this world that is not going to exist anymore. His whole family's fucked. I mean, they'll be fine because they have money, but the son was taught, he's basically taught a language that nobody speaks anymore. The mother too, like, I got the sense that the prince probably had like affairs or whatever, but he has this loveless marriage that was a symbol. He was happy with it when it was a symbol, but now it's not a symbol that means anything anymore because his wife occupies a job that will no longer exist. But yeah, it's very dense. I'm going to attribute the first half to just maybe wrong time. I think it's great, and I will just say that I do think it deserves to be on it, even though I'm not as big on it as you are. I can only see this going up on reviewings.
And part of that duality of the film, of like lots of contrasts, is the interesting part for me, of course, is the reason why I brought up all that backstory about Visconti, is the fact that there is kind of like this tension in the film, in that you can feel his sympathies lie both with the aristocracy, and he is somewhat reminiscing about this period, but at the same time he is politically like against this style of lifestyle, and you can tell that. And there's throughout the film, it's got a lot to say politically that I feel like I haven't seen anywhere as expressed so elegantly. Particularly the idea that one of the more poignant lines in the film that is repeated twice, Tancredi brings it up in the beginning, and then Lancaster, his character, the Don, internalizes that and realizes the meaning of it. And it's everything must change so that everything can stay the same.
Se vogliamo che tutto rimanga com'è, bisogna che tutto cambi. Mi sono spiegato.
He knows, the Leopard knows that everything's changing, and he's essentially working to make sure that the change happens, because he supports Tancredi, he supports all of his political manipulations, he refuses his political appointment and instead recommends essentially what I assume is like a proto-mafia boss that's the town mayor. I feel like this man could appear in The Godfather Part 2 and be at home. But there is the interesting political idea that I was aware of, because I'm tuned into these things, that the fact that the power structures in the film don't change. Like, theoretically, democracy has been brought to Italy. They've unified. There's more voice. But the fact is that, like, the aristocracy was here, and it's just been moved over to the bourgeoisie over here. And so everything changed. Political power changed. The shape of the nation changed, but nothing changed. The state of the Sicilians, the workers, everything, it's all the same. And that's the story of history right there.
Same shit, different day.
Yep. Same shit, different government.
See, if anything, Burt Lancaster probably could have succeeded by joining this new government.
Speaking of which, I don't know if you know this, but Burt Lancaster, I was looking into him as an actor and as a person. He was incredibly based. Was he?
Good.
Like,
always good to hear.
I cannot offhand think of a more just an honorable man. He did fundraising and was present at fundraising for Martin Luther King, and was present at the I Have a Dream speech along with Marlon Brando and someone else.
Marlon Brando in particular. But yes.
Love this film. Like, I love it. I didn't think I would. I think it was just like always a historical curiosity and an interesting film, but I genuinely liked it this time, and I highly recommend the Blu-ray. It's got a heck of a lot of bonus features and
nice. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But do you think it should be on the list?
Oh, yes, it should be on
okay. There we go. List. Hey, there we go. The symbol's that.